Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gridiron and Growth, the podcast that takes you inside the minds of business and sports champions. And Bennie and I are thrilled to have Angel Johnson, CEO and founder of Iconi, as well as an Air Force veteran who was one of the first 100 Black women to graduate from the famed Citadel. Please welcome Angel Johnson.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you both doing?
We're doing great. And you told us before the call, let's just start out with the good news. Today is your 4-year anniversary of Iconi, an athleisure brand that it motivates, inspires, and teaches others, as well as gives back 10% of everything you own. You give back to nonprofits. What's it feel like to be celebrating your 4-year anniversary?
It finally feels like I have reached, I think, a level. I feel like a CEO this year. I think 2022 is like my first year I really stepped into it after being a military officer and just feel like I was moonlighting as a CEO. But I really feel like, wow, I've really learned a lot in 4 years and, built a brand with, I'm not a celebrity. I'm not an influencer. I barely even had like social media, if we're talking about that, before I even started my brand. So to be able to do this is amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You said it took you 4 years to feel like a CEO. Can you talk a little bit about that journey in terms of how you've built this company and just now feeling like a CEO? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So my first year when I started my business, I was still in the military. I was still in the military for my first 2 years of business. So that was my full-time job. I was going to work at, 6 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 3 and then taking a break and then doing Iconi stuff. So, I still had this full-time responsibility, which was my number one responsibility because the military at all times reminds you they're your number one responsibility. So then transitioning out the military and doing this full time, it was really the first time I think in my life where I told people, like, oh my gosh, I got to feed myself. There's no mom, there's no military, because I even went to a military college. So I was used to that kind of discipline and that structure. It's like, I'm literally doing this by myself. I am so scared. So,
Hey.
and then just as the years going on, not just leading myself, having to lead other people outside of the military. So now when I have employees or partners or manufacturers I work with, it's me setting the vision. And a lot of times in the military, all the time in the military, it's the general or the colonel setting the vision for you. So it's like, oh, I not only have to set the vision, I have to help other people understand what the vision is and help them execute it. So it was a much different experience for me.
Let's talk about that transition a lot. Bennie and I had to go through that, not to the scale in terms of the importance of work you were doing with the Air Force, but transitioning from an identity and a purpose. And we've been scared too in that transition, right? Even everybody who goes through a transition is scared one way or another. What helped you most? Yeah, still scared, right? Still scared, scared to pick up the phone sometimes, right?
Right.
But what helped you the most in that transition to build the successful company Iconi has become?
What helped me the most was just leaning on the stuff I had already known about the military and what I learned in the military. I went through a major identity crisis because since I was 18, I've been prepping my whole life just to do 20 years in the Air Force. I didn't think of anything else. I never had a resume. I never had a LinkedIn because I was like, I'm going to be an Air Force officer through and through. But then when I finally reached my 8-year mark and I was like, this is not something I may want to do for the rest of my life. I was like, what do I want to do? But the transition, I think leaning on the things I know about from the military, like, hey, if you want to learn something, research it. So that's the first thing I did. I like Iconi is like, people ask me, how did you learn how to do that for Iconi? It's like, I just researched it. And they're like, oh, you didn't talk to anybody? I was like, no, not too much later on when I probably could have. But I'm super introverted too. So even having to pick up the phone or I had to kind of learn those habits because I was allowed to be introverted and only talk when I needed to talk in the military to do my job. Like, hey, blah, 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 blah. I can do this brief, but I don't have to talk to you guys in like real time or those kind of situations. So that kind of transition and then just realizing that it was okay to be myself, like going back to the influencer thing. Like at no period of time was I ever thinking, hey, I want to be an influencer. There's nothing wrong with being an influencer, by the way. But I just thought I'm not going to shift my personality. That's not my personality. I am a rigid, nerdy kid from South Carolina, and that's the way I'm going to go into my business.
Love that. Love that. Just that identity and just the self-awareness or the way you're approaching things. I do want to just double click on what you learned in the military and what you learned as a Air Force officer, and how those disciplines, that knowledge, that skill, the discipline has transformed into business. I think that's one of the things that athletes are trying to do, and that Ryan and myself have tried to do in terms of transitioning into the corporate world and the entrepreneurial world. Talk to us a little bit about the disciplines that you used in the military that are going over into Iconi right now to make it successful.
Organization is number one. So you have to be organized in business. Even if you have organized chaos, just be organized. Being on time. There's been so many times when I've shown up for something like maybe 5 minutes early or like exactly on time. And people just will comment like, oh, you're the first person I've had ever be on time. And I was like,
Wow.
what? Why? Like, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. And it's like, if I'm being late, I'm gonna be like a minute late. I'm not going to be like, I've been on business calls where people have expected me to wait 15 minutes. They're like, oh, sorry, that was our block of window. I was like, no. You have to be at the beginning of the block or I'm going to log off. So,
100%.
Yeah.
and then I think just working with a diverse group of people, I think so oftentimes people are only used to working with people that either look like them or talk like them or from the same region. In the military, you have to work with everyone. I spent like most of my 20s actually overseas. So like I've been in Afghanistan, Kuwait, Qatar, and like just learning how to interact with different people. It's so important and to be culturally sensitive to them. So like now I have manufacturers over the world and I make sure I write down on the calendar, like Lunar New Year's coming up, for example. If I have manufacturers that are in different parts of Asia that celebrate Lunar New Year, I need to go be culturally respectful to them. And that's something people don't think the military teaches you that, but it is because you have to be culturally sensitive all the time because people, we're going to so many different places. We don't want to offend anyone. And I also think coming from my analysis background, just researching and actually putting in the work, a lot of people want to like just, buy a free course off Instagram, but it's like, really, how about just don't buy anything? Just take the time to learn about the free resources out there and do the research. It will carry you further.
Well, I'm going to stay here for a second, and I promise we'll talk about Iconi as soon. And everybody visit iconi.com, ICONI.com. But you were one of the first 100 Black women to graduate from the Citadel. What in the world was that experience like?
Crazy time. So yeah, like in high school, I was really big into JROTC. I was one of those nerdy kids. I always had the little pickle uniform on. And then my Army colonel, who was my instructor, he actually went there in the 70s before women were even allowed to go there. The first Black woman actually didn't graduate until 2002. So this is very recent.
Whoa.
The Mag 7. So yeah, he encouraged me to go. He's like, you should go to the Citadel. No, I'm not going. I'm going to go to University of South Carolina. I'm just going to enjoy college. And he was like, oh, well, you should just go. It's just, so I got a lot of pressure to keep on going. And then I ended up going. It was a culture shock because back then, I sound like Uncle back then, but they changed the rules since women had to cut their hair like super short. You could only have like 3 inches on top and 1 on the sides and the back. So and then the guys were bald. And that was your first year, your first knob year. And it was just like hell on earth. But it was like a great experience. Everything I learned there, just like the discipline. People are always really impressed. So that gets me like good intros. And then just like the fun and the experience I've had there. Like I'm meeting like colonels from the British intelligence agency. Like I don't need those people, like, or we'll probably never cross paths with people, but it's just a cool experience. Just learning how to navigate life.
Yeah, let's even go. Yeah, let's go even deeper down this conversation right here in terms of the university that you went to, Citadel. Is there one conversation, one moment that really sticks out with one of these colonels, or one of these conversations that really sticks out in terms of, wow, that was incredible?
Well, I think the biggest piece of advice that helped me from that experience, the whole college experience, is what one of my favorite Air Force ROTC professors, Major Mosley, he always used to tell me, bloom where you're planted. And so that helped me as I went to like, middle Texas, Abilene, Texas, or San Angelo, Texas, where it was just a Walmart and there was nothing else to do. Or when I went to the Middle East or, in starting a business, always bloom where you're planted. I tell people I can thrive under any circumstance and there's nothing I can't do. That's how I carry myself through life.
Make sure everybody writes that down. Bloom where you're planted.
Yeah. Bloom where you planted. I love it because you can do that, right? You can do that anywhere, and that's within you. But let's go back in time. 4 years ago, you're still in the Air Force. You decide to start Iconi, a new athleisure brand. What went into that decision? Why did Iconi have to be created?
Well, I used to work out on the base gym, and it was just one time I had this random experience. I was working out, and then one of my friends came up to me, and he was like, "Hey, I don't know what type of leggings those are, but I can see, everything you got going on in those leggings." I was like, "Oh no, I'm at the base gym. Like this is so embarrassing." And I was like, "Dang, I can't wear these leggings anymore." So I just tossed them in the trash. I don't think it became a thought. And then I used to work these night shifts when I first got to Colorado. We used to either work from 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. And when it was one of my 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. days, I think I was frustrated with the Air Force. I was like, what would I do outside the Air Force? And I was like, I don't know. And then one day I was just like, hey, I would want to start an athleisure brand or activewear brand. I love that. And that's something I would love to do. And it's something that I could help other people not experience the same frustrations I have experience with when it comes to activewear. And I remember turning to Sergeant Singer and I was like, hey, I'm going to start an activewear brand. He was like, it's 2:00 in the morning. We've got 2 more hours. Just calm down. So, but that's what went into it. And then like my first year in business, it was just like a side hustle. I didn't even tell anyone at work really. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go through life. And then I got contacted in August, my first year in business, to maybe like try out for Oprah's favorite things. And I was like, this is a scam. But then they sent me like a UPS label overnight. Like they paid for all the shipping. I was like, oh, this is probably real. It's probably real. Let me just see. And then like 2 months later, they're like, oh, you're an Oprah's favorite things. I was like, okay, I don't know really what that means. Like, what's that going to mean? And then, I told someone at work, hey, I'm going to be an Oprah's favorite things. Like, you're going to need to take off work. And I was like, am I really? What's going to happen? They're like, you need to research what's going to happen with Oprah. And then I researched, I was like, oh, yeah. So I took like a month off work and I finally told everyone I worked with my commander. And they're very like accepting. When I got back from like having a month off, I was just very lucky I could take a month off. They all had the magazine. They're like, oh, sign it. You're going to be famous one day. So they're very supportive throughout my whole journey. So I really appreciate them.
Did you get to meet Oprah?
No, I didn't. I was one of those people that I didn't get to, because it was during the pandemic and she was Zooming people, but I was still working. So like I could never meet the schedule thing. I was like, no, sorry, I'm gonna be at work and I can't just run out to my car during work.
Dedicated. Angel, you are an influencer, by the way. Just to let you know, you're influencing hundreds of thousands of people and signing autographs. You're definitely influencing people and you are an influencer now. So congratulations.
Thank
Just
you.
want to acknowledge your growth. I think that's incredible. And it's always funny how these companies start, just from a problem that you have personally that you want to be changed. And sometimes the best ideas come at 2 a.m. I love that. Love that. So what's the journey been like so far? 4 years in, I know we talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but what's the journey been like? So, Oprah's favorite things. What happened after that? And then where are you now? And then also I want to dive into the importance of 10% of everything that is, people buy your product goes back to nonprofits. I also want to talk a little bit about that, but please just share a little bit about where you are or where you went after the journey of being on Oprah's favorite things.
So I rode the Oprah wave, and then that really taught me I had to learn about business. So yes, I was doing really good at like packing orders and getting customer requests out on time. But after that, I had to learn actually how to run a business. How do you do marketing? What are different ways to source manufacturing? How can I pay for this without using my personal credit cards? Because I had to pay myself back because no bank was going to loan me money. I was like, hey, I'm an Air Force officer. I just started my business a couple months ago and I'm in Oprah. Can you give me money? So,
which they should have been able to give you money, by the way. Let's be clear. A lot of people going with a lot less. You know what I mean? Yeah,
100%.
But they act like they didn't know who Oprah was.
Yes. At the bank, yeah.
They're
mad they don't got her money.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so just learning on this journey, I've learned so much about like how to manage people, how to manage my business, and like I really have appreciated the journey. Like where I am now, to have a COO, which is really interesting how I met her. It's like all these things just happened to fall into place. She actually came from Brazil. And when she first got here, you can't work if you're in school, but she had all this experience working at Brazilian activewear brands. So she joined a mentoring program to be my mentor, and we're actually only a year apart. And she became my mentor. And then, maybe a year and a half through our mentoring process, she was so invested in the business as my mentor. And I was like, hey, do you want to be my COO? And she said, yes. And I was like, boom, got a COO that knows everything about activewear. And she's like, she can speak Portuguese, helping me source activewear from Brazil. So, and create Brazil and, activewear in Brazil. And where we are now is just continuing to grow. Like, this is probably going to be one of our biggest years. We're trying to release 6 new collections this year, which we haven't ever done before. And just working with so many new people this year and having manufacturers all over the world, not just like in one country. So I think we've really expanded our operations. And then this is the first year that we've been funded. So we got outside capital last year, impact investment. And so, how does that change the scope of business? So, but it's definitely been a roller coaster. Actually, last year was I think my toughest year for business because of everything personal. I became a full-time caregiver, and I actually had to run Iconi from hospitals for 4 months as I was trying to take care of my parents and manage all of that. But I was able to get my first investment from the seat of a hospital couch, and then just carry the business. But it's been people like Karen, my COO, and, my manufacturers looking out for me, and just the team of models and photographers I work that have helped carry the business, even when I've experienced like my own personal lows.
Angel, would love to just now even go even deeper into the mindset. Number one, from coming from a military background, being a Black woman in business, now the mindset of getting your first investment, but then also taking care of your parents while running a business. Can you just double click on your mindset? Where did you first learn about just continuing to have a strong mind? And then talk about a little bit about the mindset of what it's like running your own business from a hospital and just those challenges. Can you talk about that mindset?
I think my mindset definitely comes from my mom. Like, I've seen her work 3 different jobs and give me everything I wanted growing up. It's definitely like a spoiled kid growing up. My mom is like a workhorse. She works. But at the same time, she would always make time to, like, hey, we're going to go to a soup kitchen. We're going to do Toys for Tots. You need to make sure you set up a certain amount of your clothes and your toys away, not just the bad ones, because you're going to give it away, because you have to learn to give into the world as the world has given to you. So I think that's where the mindset but like, I think I'm very lucky. My mom was never my first bully. I know people say their parents are their first bully, but my mom, even though I was a a Black woman, Black girl living in the South, my mom never raised me with a glass ceiling. So I used to, like, I've had, like, they still have, like, my parents have like things on their fridge where they're like, what were you going to be when you grow up, Angel? And I was like, first Black woman president of the United States. So it was like, I never had a glass ceiling. There was nothing that my parents or my family told me I couldn't do. I remember telling like my old Southern grandma, I was like, I'm not cooking for Thanksgiving or Christmas because I'm going to be president, and presidents don't cook. And they actually went with it. I was so surprised. Like, my cousins are like, I don't know how you got away with that for years. I was like, yeah, because I think there's the strong mindset and the support from my family. So my family never capped me. So I never thought, hey, there was a limit for Black women. I mean, I saw that more as I got older and saw what's in the world, but just my thing is, like, nothing can stop me. That's what I've been telling myself. Like, nothing can stop me. Like, I built this business from nothing. I got through the Citadel. I got through the Air Force. Like, when I was in the Air Force, I was the only Black woman officer all the time. Like, I went to Afghanistan. Like, what can stop me? I just shown that I can continue to do whatever I say I want to do. So what's going to change?
Wow, that's incredible. I was gonna go somewhere else, but you mentioned that the mindset and battling through. You've been a part of an organization. Benny and I have too, but yours is greater in the military. So many different types of people, so many different, backgrounds, ways of life, and yet leadership may not look that same way as the rest of the organization. What are 3 things an organization can do and I believe you called it culturally sensitive, just to be culturally aware of your employees. What are 3 things companies or institutions can do to really make an equal opportunity, not necessarily an equal outcome for those people in the institutions?
I just think recognize that we all come from different backgrounds. So one of my mentors in the Air Force, she told me about this book. It's called The Loudest Duck. And it talks about how introverts are a lot of times overlooked. And then it also talks about like how what we call biases, you can think about it's things our grandmas told us. So we all bring our grandma's opinions to the table, but we need to realize that we all have different grandmas. And then we also have to notice that the loudest duck in the room, which is usually in those military and athletic and, police type environments, the loudest duck is usually the one people are like, oh, that's the best leader because they're the loudest. But they're not a lot of times. They're just loud. So I think, one, just recognizing that people have different backgrounds. 2, you can lead with empathy while holding people to a standard. I know people don't think they go hand in hand, but they definitely do. And then I think 3, just like really just tuning into what's going on in the world. I remember one of the biggest slaps in my face, I think, was like in 2020 when everything with Black Lives Matter was happening. Our commander at the time, he sent out an email and it had like these people protesting and they had signs, but they were funny signs. There was like when people were protesting like at a college about like a coffee shop. And I was like, hey, that's like, I get it. It can be funny, but do you think this is the right time to send it out? Like when I'm struggling, other people are struggling. Like we're wearing a uniform every day, but we're seeing our people on TV get treated differently. I was like, no, that's probably not the best time. And then sending stuff out like that when we were deployed, like, hey, yeah, I get we were deployed. We all bleed, blue or whatever when we're deployed. But at the same time, we're seeing people at home that look like us while we're overseas. So
How do you lead with empathy and still set a standard? I think that's like a super hard balance, especially coming from your background and in the background that Ryan and I come from. I'm trying to think of a moment where there was some empathy, but the standard was still set. I'd love to hear just an example of either how you do it, or how you've seen it done.
So in the Air Force, for example, we have we have a physical fitness assessment every year. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows the standard. It's based on your gender, your age, and your physical ability. That's the standard. It's the standard. It's the standard. But every year when it came around, people would have different things like, oh, I hurt myself. I can't do this. I can't do this. So sometimes the test would be tweaked. Like I had an example of one time, an airman came to me maybe a week before the test and said, I'm going to fail the test. And I was like, this was coming up. You do this every year. I'm going to fail the test because this, and this personal issues. And I was like, well, you knew the standard was the standard. So now let's find a way in a week to at least get you to a different level, but presenting to them like, hey, if you fail this test, you're probably going to get a letter of counseling or a letter of reprimand. That's the standard. I still care about you as a person. I still care about your personal issues. We can help push your tests back. We can help get you in shape for your tests more. I'll run with you. We'll get you a pacer. We used to get people pacers all the time. If they couldn't, we're like, hey, this person's going to run the pace that if you stand behind this person, you're going to fail. So we'll pace you. And then it's like, hey, at least by the last lap, you need to be in front of this pacer. Or like, hey, we'll make sure, we'll record you doing your push-ups and sit-ups so you can or we'll teach you, make sure you're running on the inside lane so you can, pick up that little bit of extra time, just things like that. Or, but letting them know after they fail the test, if they did fail the test, in this particular case, you failed the test, you're not a bad person. You're not a failure. You just failed the test. And that's just one test. Now we have 90 days. You have 90 days to get back in shape for the new test. Let's just get back in shape. Let's just brush that one off. It's one. Let's go. So
how could he have failed? How could that person they must have wanted to fail, but you bring up these points, and by the way, fantastic job as a leader, not only is talking about the standard, but being empathetic like you're talking about in terms of here's what I can do as a leader to help you. What about moments when people didn't listen to you as a leader? How did you handle those moments?
I never yell. I was never a yeller. I was very quiet. They're like, oh, Captain Johnson's kind of scary because she's super quiet. I would just bring the people in and talk to them because there's been times I've told people again and again, hey, this was the standard. You didn't meet the standard. There's going to be consequences. So sometimes you have to let people receive the consequences, and then try to figure out what's wrong. Because me inherently, I don't think people want to do wrong because that just makes their life harder, and especially in the military. But like, what is the root issue? Is there a lack of understanding, or is there a lack of like effort? What is the issue? Because a lot of times there was an issue. And not saying that everyone has a bad home life, but sometimes they just don't understand, or sometimes they just don't transition well. The military, for example, just like business, requires you to constantly transform and transition, and some people aren't used to that.
I mean, just coming, Ryan, from our background, and this is a lot of this is just resonating, Angel, just because, sometimes it is. I mean, these are the most high performing people. These are some of the most disciplined people. So if something is not going right, have you as a leader, have you asked the question, hey, how are you? Or what's going on? And I know some people they try to avoid those conversations. Sometimes I've done it myself in terms of, you see, not necessarily in sports, but just in life in general, you avoid trying to have that tough conversation, or that conversation of like, well, I don't know this person that well. Like, do I really ask that? Or I don't really want to have this conversation. And I think we need to force each other and force ourselves to really be there for someone, especially if we want to have a high performing team, if we want to have a high performing business. This person goes through things just like you, So shout out to you and the way you conduct those one-on-ones and you push people to the standard. I would love to go back to Iconi now and talk about, just the way, everything, if somebody buys something, 10% of it goes back to nonprofits. And I know you said earlier in the show that comes from your mom and wanting to give back, or, hey, going to make sure you give back. Talk a little bit about that. And did that start right when the business started, or how did that just all come about in terms of giving 10% back of profit to nonprofits?
It started right from the beginning. It's definitely been a challenge because not every quarter of the business you're going to be profitable, but our nonprofit partners like understand that. If they reach out, I'm like, hey, I can't support you this quarter. But I've also been bashed for it from when I've gotten advice from potential investors. They're like, you can't do that right now. You got to wait till you're like making billions to be doing something like that. And I was like, well, why can't we just start small to help our community? Because people didn't understand, like during COVID, giving $1,000 check to a nonprofit organization, it could change whether they stayed open during COVID or not, or the services they provided during COVID. So yeah, I get that from my mom and wanting to instill those, but just like helping out, just seeing what it does to help out people. Like we made these shirts, these ambitious shirts, and it had what the definition of being ambitious was, and we gave them the clothes to kids for Denver. And all the shirts were gone like within the first hour. They called, they're like, oh, the kids love this shirt. They want the shirt again. I was like, okay, I'll have to make some more shirts. But just like seeing their face and there's a brand new piece of clothing. And I was just like, I was like, okay, that's something cool. I would have never thought. And then just having different nonprofits reach out like, hey, I was like, hey, maybe I can only give you $500, or, I can't, I'm splitting this up to help other nonprofits. They're like, no, that's okay. Because a lot of nonprofits, we tend to think of like big charities where, the CEO gets massive amount of money, but there's so many different community grassroots organizations that need our help.
Awesome.
What's an area that you found lately that needs more help? What's an area in your giving back that you've been like, oh, this is a issue that we can fix, or this is an issue that really means a lot to me?
So an area lately is domestic violence. I didn't realize how much. I've never experienced that. But I never realized how much it not maybe grew during the pandemic, but was highlighted during the pandemic because so many people were together. And especially when it trickled down to children, a lot of children have been experiencing domestic abuse. So that is an area where I never knew. And then a lot of it's our nonprofits reaching out. They'll see that like, hey, we donate to nonprofits, and they'll reach out and they'll educate me on, because before I donate to a nonprofit, I want to make sure they're actually a nonprofit. I want to get to know about the founder. And another one was Mile High Behavioral Healthcare. They have a Miracles program that helps women that have experienced abuse or substance abuse get reintegrated into just like normal living. And I never thought about that. Like, oh yeah, if you have experienced something traumatic like that, or you haven't been on, lived a life with substance abuse, of course, yeah, you just don't jump back in. It takes time.
Mhm.
So things like that have really opened my eyes to and got me more educated on different issues in the community in Denver.
We know you're a dreamer just based off of what you said earlier in the show. And, your parents never put a cap on you. And you talked about being the president of the United States and
You
all
got
the
our vote.
things, exactly, all the things that you want to achieve. Now, putting you on the hot seat, where are you taking Iconi and yourself in the next 10 to 20 years?
Next 10 to 20 years, Iconi is going to be a $1 billion activewear brand, and we're going to be headquartered out of Denver. Maybe in 20 years, I won't be the CEO. Maybe I'll just be somewhere else.
Chairwoman.
Yeah, chairwoman.
Yeah.
But I definitely, in 10 to 20 years, we're going to have programs with rehabilitation centers in the Denver Aurora metro area. And we'll be the business that helps transition people and give them their first stability back into normal life. We'll have employees based in Denver. And then I also want to make sure we have a group of manufacturers across the globe that are still focused on sustainability, human rights, and employee rights. And then I really want to have this culture of just like fun. There's so many like layoffs going on, and I've never experienced that because I've only been in the military. Just the way certain corporations treat people, I want to just promote this culture of just like the standard empathy, but also like we can build this company in so many different ways and we can build it together. So I think that is my goal for Iconi and continue to expand, whether it's our size range. This year, we're going to introduce some gender neutral clothing. So just always find a way to adapt and change and be more of the brand that we want to be.
Well, I'm going to throw another mention in for the tall sizes. Angel, Bennie, you don't know this. Angel, in addition to being a dreamer, a CEO, and an Air Force veteran, she also was a part of Amazon's program to help startups. So she's been recognized and been in Amazon's incubator as well. So I mentioned there, I was like, hey, tall sizes, Angel, let's go. But, whether it was somebody telling you couldn't donate right away 10% of your funds, or somebody telling you it was a bad idea to start Iconi at 2 a.m, those are lies people told you. And I love lies people tell us, because every time we're on the way to doing something, somebody tells us a lie and we can choose to believe them or not. And clearly you have chosen not to believe a lot of the lies. But what were some of the lies when you started your company that people told you that you chose not to believe that made the biggest impact on where you are today?
I think the biggest one was if you get out the military before 20, you're done. You're going to have a bad life. I think that was but all my friends have gotten out. People have told them that. I have a friend that's an author and an artist now. And when she was getting out, people were like, you're going to fail. You'll be back. They always tell you like, oh, you'll be back. And it's like, what if we do come back? It's okay. But if we don't, it's also okay. So I think that was one of the biggest lies, like, hey, I wouldn't be successful if I got out the military. Like I needed to do both. And I think a lie, like extrinsic motivation doesn't really do anything for me. If people are telling me I'm doing well or if I'm doing bad, I'm like, all right. But like I'm at like intrinsic motivation, I can tear myself down all the time in the meanest way. So I think the biggest lies I've told myself, even though I've been raised without the ceiling, is that I can't do it. I think that's one of the things I tell myself. Like if I make a mistake, like get a bad customer review, or if a customer told me the size didn't work for her, I take it super personally. And I'm like, oh, I failed. I lost the day. So I think that's the biggest lie I tell myself, is that I can't make mistakes in business because I'm a small business. Yes, I always will strive to be as perfect as possible in business, but it's not going to always be like that. And just because I make a mistake, it's how I address the mistake with the customer and how I make amends for it. It's not the mistake itself. So customers have told me like, oh yeah, I was really mad that the size medium or whatever didn't fit me, but you talked to me and you helped me figure out my size, and now I'm going to change my review. It was a great product.
Wow. That is phenomenal. Incredible. Yeah, I'm snapping. I want to work for you. I'm going to check the job openings on Iconi. All right, come on. Well, Angel, this has been truly incredible, inspirational, impactful, educational. Congratulations on your personal success and decisions, as well as the exponential growth of Iconi. No question, our listeners' favorite athletic wear brand now. Iconi, ICONI.com. You can find them. They've been mentioned in over 50 publications, the Bro Bible, Oprah Winfrey, all these things. Thank you so much, Angel, and congratulations.
Shout out to you, Angel. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.